What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Paul Brettel. I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen there, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So as I alluded to at the end of my last video, what I wanted to discuss here was an article that I will be putting out every Friday over at Cheesehead TV. Basically, it's my final thoughts. It's a brain dump of the upcoming matchup between the Green Bay Packers and their opponent, this week the New Orleans Saints, where I jump from topic to topic, just taking a look at the overall matchup, things that I'll be watching, really anything and everything that's on my mind for the Green Bay Packers upcoming game. So for today's video, I wanted to dive into those bullet points here. So let's get started. First up, the offensive line, specifically left tackle. It's truly a testament to how good Elton Jenkins is that the Green Bay Packers are going to be without David Bakhtiari, the best left tackle in football, and there seems to be very little concern about that. And I get it. I understand why Elton Jenkins has proven really anywhere that he lines up along the offensive line that he can not only hold his own, but he can excel there. And based on what we've seen at the training camp practices, what we've heard from reporters, what we've heard from the coaching staff, there's no reason to suggest that left tackle won't be any different. However, I will point out he does only have 29 career left tackle snaps in the NFL, and he is going to be going up against a very good pass rushing duo in Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport. I have the utmost faith in Elton Jenkins. This isn't to say that I have any sort of concern whatsoever, but I just think it's a testament to how good he truly is. So I did want to point that out because it does seem to be flying under the radar a little bit. But I also wanted to highlight that he doesn't have a ton of experience there either. Sticking with the offensive line, we discussed this in last week's video. Packers are going to have two rookies along the interior. And as Matt LaFleur said, especially early on this season with these two, there's likely going to be some growing pains. That needs to be expected. I know I've said it on here previously, but we probably aren't going to see the same continuity, overall flow from this offensive line that we're accustomed to seeing, because typically this group is a bunch of veterans. However, there's two rookies now. And while there are going to be growing pains, we all need to understand that. We all need to accept that beforehand. Aaron Rodgers is also right in that these two need to play like veterans. This is a Super Bowl caliber roster. This is a team with Super Bowl aspirations, expectations. They need those guys to play like veterans because the name of the game in Green Bay is what it is, the same today as it's been for Aaron Rodgers' entire career here. Keep Aaron Rodgers upright, give him time, and he will pick defenses apart. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers picking defenses apart, if the Packers offensive line can give him that time, I don't see why he and the receivers can't have a huge day against this Saints cornerback group. That cornerback position for New Orleans is incredibly thin right now. They only have 3 cornerbacks listed on the depth chart: Rashaan Lattimore, Desmond Trufant, and Paulson Adebo. Ken Crowley, who was expected to be cornerback 2, has been ruled out for Sunday's game. Now, of course, New Orleans isn't going to go into the game with just 3 cornerbacks on the depth chart or on the active roster. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, P.J. Williams, they're listed as safeties. Both can fill in at cornerback. We may likely see a call-up or two from the practice squad. And keep in mind, Kadar Holman and Kavari Russell, 2 former Green Bay Packers, are on that New Orleans Saints practice squad. But regardless, this is a very thin cornerback unit. Lattimore is going to be tasked with what I imagine is spending most of the game on Devontae Adams. Good luck to him on that one. And then there's Desmond Trufant, who he was just recently cut by the Bears, had a rough go of it in Detroit last season. He is at the end of his career versus the beginning of it. It's just not the same player that he used to be. Paulson Adebo, rookie 3rd-round pick from Stanford. Really, really liked Adebo coming out of college. However, it's worth noting that he hasn't played since the 2019 season, and he's a rookie going up against Aaron Rodgers. That's usually a recipe for success for Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. So if that offensive line could give him time, those Packers receivers, Aaron Rodgers, could be a big day against a very thin New Orleans cornerback group. With Jair Alexander locking down his half of the field, just as he does, as we saw last season, there's probably going to be a lot of targets going Kevin King's way. But I wanted to point out that was the same case last year, and he still had no interceptions. But this week, they're going to be going up against, like the offense, a thin cornerback group. Packers defense is going to be going up against a very thin Saints wide receiver group. Michael Thomas is out injured. Traquan Smith is out for this game as well. He's been ruled out due to injury. So that leaves the Saints with Marquez Callaway, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Deontay Harris, all of which have fewer than 31 career targets. There's also Ty Montgomery, who Green Bay Packer fans are familiar with. Not necessarily someone that you have to worry about taking a game over. And then Chris Hogan, former Patriot. Again, he's at the end of his career versus the beginning. This is a thin wide receiver group. I would expect to see Alvin Kamara in the passing game quite a bit. As I mentioned in the last video, he had 14 targets and as a pass catcher last year against Green Bay. I would expect a similar amount because honestly, they don't have a ton of experienced receiving options for Jameis Winston to target. So hopefully, all that said, that's a recipe for Kevin King to have some success and to get this season off on the right foot. At the end of the game, there's going to be some specific snap counts that I'm looking at. The first one, how many snaps did Eric Stokes see? Second, what is the snap count, but also the touches, pass catches, carries? What is that breakdown between Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon? I'm curious to see is it 50-50, 60-40, one way or the other. I'm curious to see how all that unfolds. And then Rashaan Gary and Preston Smith. This one's kind of dependent on Zadarius Smith being in there because obviously if Smith does not play and he is questionable, we're going to see a lot of both of them. But if Zadarius is in there, what's the snap count look like between Rashaan Gary and Preston Smith? Last year, Smith was on the field for consistently 60-65% of the snaps. Gary was around 45%. I know that doesn't add up to 100. They were on the field at the same times on occasions last year. But is that going to be more 50-50? Is Gary, who's an ascending player in his third year, is he going to see more snaps than Preston Smith this year? It's only week one. Obviously, that can change over the course of the season, and you would hope it's going to be dependent upon who's playing their best. If Preston Smith is clearly outplaying Rashaan Gary, he should see more of the field and vice versa. But that is something that I'll be watching for at the end of the game, see how that breaks down. The running game, the Green Bay Packers running game behind this offensive line, they're up against a Saints defensive front that gave up the third fewest rushing yards last season. As always, it's going to be important. It's important within this Matt LaFleur offense that Green Bay Packers find success on the ground. We've seen a number of examples. It's very rare, so I shouldn't say a number of examples. It's rare, but we have examples of when this offense does sputter. Oftentimes, it's tied to the running game struggling. Exhibit A would be week 6 against Tampa Bay last season. Green Bay couldn't get anything going on the ground. Also didn't help that they fell behind early, but they really struggled on the ground. That matriculates down to the passing game, which can lead to issues. And for reference, Green Bay had 98 rushing yards against New Orleans last year, so they were held in check, still able to find success. So if it is tough sledding behind those two rookies against the stout Saints defensive front, that of course doesn't mean that the offense is going to be shut down. But as we've seen, it does make things more challenging for this unit. So how well can this run game function against, like I said, what is a good Saints defensive front? Bouncing back to Zadarius Smith, he is questionable for this game. He practiced in a limited capacity on Wednesday and Thursday. However, he was held out of Friday's practice. Matt LaFleur said that he is going to give Zadarius literally right up until game time to see how he feels and see if he can play. If he doesn't play, it's obviously a huge loss, that goes without saying. But even if he does play, he may be in a limited capacity. And if that's the case, either of those are the cases, this is a huge opportunity for Rashaan Gary. He is as poised as you can be from everything that we've heard to be that guy who takes that year 3 leap. And without Zadarius, or if Zadarius is in a limited capacity, Gary is going to be that guy at that edge rusher position. And he has a terrific opportunity to back up everything that we've heard this offseason. Week 1, leave his mark on the game, as I said, where he is the guy. We all know the importance of pressure, and that's especially true this week when you're going up against Jameis Winston, who can be turnover prone. The last thing the Green Bay Packers want to do is allow him to get comfortable, because if they can rattle him, if they can consistently get after him, it's probably going to be a turnover opportunity in there for him. So this is a big week for Rashaan Gary, who could, like I said, really catapult his year 3 in the NFL with a strong week 1 performance against the New Orleans Saints. Turnovers. Back to Jameis Winston and turnovers. we know that that's been a big part of his career. He threw 30 of them in 2019, the last time that he was a starting quarterback when he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I believe I alluded to this or talked about this on my last episode. But do we see a toned down version of that in the Sean Payton offense? When Jameis was in Tampa, he didn't have a coach like Sean McVay. He also had a year this past season, 2020, to learn the offense, learn the system, and also pick Drew Brees' brain. I mean, there's not a lot of better options out there in terms of being a backup for a year and who you could sit behind and who you could learn from. So, do all of those factors, does that lead to a more or a less turnover prone Jameis Winston? Ultimately, we won't know until he takes the field. But while turnovers are probably always going to be a part of his career, I think that this is a valid question. Again, going back to the pressure side of things, the Green Bay Packers can certainly influence this by getting after him, putting him in tough situations, making him have to make difficult decisions on the fly if they are able to get after him. I've talked about this a few times this summer, but I'm really excited to see if Kenny Clark moves around or how much he moves around. It's only week one, so if it's not a lot, again, we can't read a ton into it, but I am excited to see if we see more of him away from the nose tackle. The nature of being a nose tackle in the NFL is that you're not really going to fill a stat sheet. Your job is there to eat up space, occupy double teams, and your teammates are definitely going to feel your presence. The linebackers, the edge rushers, they're going to know you're on the field, but at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to see eye-popping numbers from a nose tackle. However, Kenny Clark still was able to produce because he's Kenny Clark. He's just that good. So if we have TJ Slayton in the middle, Tyler Lancaster, if he gets more action there, he is questionable for this week. We'll see if he plays. But in general, that allows Green Bay to move Kenny Clark to that four tech out towards the guard tackle area. And that's where you get one-on-one opportunities. And that's what you want to give Kenny Clark more of, because he can absolutely wreck a game from the outside and having those one-on-one opportunities. So that's what I'm hoping to see from this defensive front and this Joe Barry defense this season. Keep our eyes on that against New Orleans. Sticking with the Joe Barry defense, they are going to be tested in their tackling abilities because of Alvin Kamara. Last year against Green Bay, he had 195 total yards, broke what I think was about 87 tackles that game. And it's going to take all 11 players going to the ball, going to Kamara when he has it. Because Sean Payton's going to dial up a number of plays where he gets the ball in space. That's the name of the game with Kamara. That's what you want to do when you have him on your offense. And right now, Packer fans, we just need to realize he's going to make a big play or two. It's just going to happen. But the Green Bay Packers need to display sound tackling abilities to try to contain him. You're not going to stop him. You can hopefully slow him. You can hopefully contain him. But you're just not going to stop Alvin Kamara. He's just too good. And when it comes to tackling, we probably are going to see some rust. For starters, it's week one. A majority of these defensive players, they didn't take any snaps during the preseason. And as we all know, practices nowadays in terms of full contact tackling, they're toned down from what it used to be. There's probably going to be some rust when it comes to tackling, but the Green Bay Packers need to find a way to wrap up, seal Kamara, contain him. And it's going to take, like I said, when he has the ball, we need all 11 guys going at him and swarming. Because if they can contain him, I already went over what this wide receiver room looks like for the New Orleans Saints. If they can contain Kamara, I mean, I don't know how New Orleans is going to go about moving the ball. We can't count out Sean Payton. He's a very good head coach, offensive-minded. Jameis Winston, while I know he's ridiculed for his interceptions, he does have a lot of arm talent as well. So I don't want to completely count them out for those reasons, but if we can take Kamara out of the game, it is going to be extremely difficult for New Orleans to move the ball. There are two key items worth noting when it comes to this game being in Jacksonville, and I talked about this on the last episode. One is the heat. The Green Bay Packers, coming from Green Bay, it has been very hot and humid this summer, but that Florida heat, that Florida humidity, it just hits different. So the Saints have the advantage in that department because they've been in Louisiana. They've been practicing in this, over the summer in 100-degree heat. It's not going to be that hot, but it is going to be close to 90. It's going to be super humid. Green Bay Packers are going to be in their dark green. So as Matt LaFleur said, hydration, hydration, hydration. This is something to certainly watch. It could affect the game if players leave with cramps. But ultimately, this game being in Jacksonville, I think, gives Green Bay the advantage because they simply don't have to play in New Orleans in the Dome in front of that crowd that creates a terrific home field advantage for New Orleans. So those are the two big things to keep our eyes on. And chances are there's probably going to be more Packer fans at this game now than Saints fans. But those are the two big things to keep our eyes on when it comes to this venue change. And the heat isn't going to be easy for Green Bay. But ultimately, when comparing the heat versus not having to play in front of the New Orleans faithful, got to give the Packers the edge in that department. Joe Barry's defense, heading back to that once again. What do we see from it? We have ideas. Like I said, I expect the linebackers to be able to make more plays because those 5-man defensive fronts. I expect Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry to have more freedom to move around. Like I said, we're going to see the too high safety look. But ultimately, what do we see? We know the premise of it, but what wrinkles are added? How do the players fit into the roles that they're asked to fill? And ultimately, again, we have to remember this is a new scheme, a new system for this defense. Early on this season, there's probably going to be some lumps along the way that they take. DB's coach, Jerry Gray, told us that in the star role, he didn't name anyone specifically, but Darnell Savage, Jair Alexander, Chandon Sullivan are going to be the big three in that slot corner role. I said this since the beginning of summer. My expectations are that we're going to see more of Jair Alexander, more of Darnell Savage in the slot than what we've seen in the past. But ultimately, I still think Chandon Sullivan is going to be the primary slot corner by season's end. When we look at snap counts at the end of the year, Sullivan will have taken the majority of them, but Alexander, Savage will have seen more than what they did in the past, especially Alexander. We saw with Jalen Ramsey in Brandon Staley's defense, which is what Joe Barry's bringing over, beginning with Vic Fangio, that there were games where he actually played a majority of his snaps from the slot. We perhaps see that with Jair, but it's all going to be dependent upon who's the opposing receiver, who's the number one receiver, what's the offensive scheme that they're running. It's going to be very week-to-week situational. Maybe one week where he takes 45 snaps from the slot, maybe another week where he takes 5. It's all going to be dependent on the opponent and what they're trying to do. Corey Bojorquez, the new punter. Hopefully we don't have to see a whole lot of him, but I'm also curious to see what the Green Bay Packers have in their new punter. Maurice Drayton, the special teams coach, you could tell he was very excited. He was raving about Bojorquez's hang time that he creates. And also it's worth noting that he is a lefty. He's left-footed, right-handed, left-footed. And Drayton said that because it puts a different spin on the ball because the majority of punters are right-footed, that can create some issues for the return man. So something to keep our eyes on as well. And sticking with the special teams unit, overall, how the heck do they perform? I mean, this unit has really, really struggled in recent years, and what we saw in the preseason, I know it doesn't exactly lend a lot of hope to Packer fans out there, but again, I urge you to remember that every preseason game, the Packers sat 30-plus players. That's a lot of their special teams contributors on the sidelines during those preseason games. So I understand the skepticism, but let's hold off just yet on weighing in on how this unit looks or performs till we get at least a couple games under our belt before we start smashing that panic button. Key stats to know as the game's going on. This isn't just against New Orleans. These are what I believe 3 of the biggest stats that determine games: turnovers, red zone success, and third down efficiency. And as good as this Packers offense was in 2020, led the NFL in scoring, first by Football Outsiders DVOA metric, Aaron Rodgers recently told Larry McCarron that year 3 is when things really start to click within an offense. Later that day, separate interview, Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator, said something very similar. And reason I bullet pointed this, want to discuss it briefly. I mean, if you're an opposing defense, that's scary. This offense was so good last year for much of the season. And the fact that they could improve, I mean, good luck. Last season, week 3, the Allen Lazard game against New Orleans, he unfortunately injured or had a core injury that was suffered that game, but he did play it out. Ended up catching 6 of his 8 targets for 146 yards with a touchdown. Also worth remembering that Devontae Adams did not play in this game last week. Another note from Nathaniel Hackett's interview with reporters, He said that the Saints blitzed Green Bay last year way more than they did any other team. So something to keep our eyes on this week, especially with 2 rookie players along the interior. Lastly, my prediction. Alvin Kamara, as I said, he's going to have a big play or two. The Packers rookie offensive linemen, they're going to experience some growing pains. But ultimately, this Green Bay Packers team is more talented. The Saints are thin at corner, they're thin at receiver. The venue being at Jacksonville, as I already discussed, I believe that benefits Green Bay more than what it does New Orleans. So Packers are going to win this one. I have it 34-24. As always, everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this Final Thoughts article. Go check it out at Dairyland Express. And until next time, and first off, enjoy the game. But until next time, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.